in Washington. And you have probably, over the course of the night, as this story has been developing, you've heard frequently the term Saturday Night Massacre, right? So the difference is this: when you hear the term Saturday Night Massacre, that is about Nixon, right? President Nixon was under investigation by the Justice Department. On a Saturday night in 1973, he decided, screw it, I will no longer stand for that. And so on a Saturday night in 1973, Nixon ordered the Attorney General to fire the prosecutor that was leading the investigation into Nixon. The Attorney General said no, and he resigned. Then Nixon ordered the Deputy Attorney General to fire the prosecutor leading the investigation. He too said no and resigned. Then Nixon ordered the number 3 official at the Justice Department to fire the prosecutor leading the investigation into him. And finally, he did it. And that was the Saturday Night Massacre. That was President Nixon's way of trying to stop an ongoing investigation of himself, which he both hated and feared. That is the Saturday Night Massacre. It is a very famous thing in American politics and law. But the Saturday Night Massacre, importantly, did not work. I mean, on that Saturday night, he was able to chop his way through the Justice Department until he was able to successfully that night fire the prosecutor. But it was a very short-lived victory. Only 10 days later, Congress opened proceedings to impeach him. 2 days after that, Justice Department just appointed another special prosecutor to replace the one that Nixon had gotten fired. So that investigation proceeded. We all know how it ended. That was the Saturday Night Massacre. It was a dramatic and unsuccessful effort, one that was ultimately ruled to be illegal. But the point of what Nixon did there was that he was trying to stop an investigation that was actively underway. And that has gone down as one of the most ignominious actions by a US president in American history. But that is not what is happening tonight in Washington, D.C. Tonight, what they are trying to do in Washington, D.C. and at the US Justice Department and at the FBI is something that I think inarguably is worse than that. Because what they are trying to do tonight is not trying to stop an active investigation. Tonight, they are seeking revenge for law enforcement personnel who participated in a previous investigation that is now over. And the reason that is worse is because the point of what they are doing tonight is to permanently, irrevocably change law enforcement in the United States of America. To make it so FBI agents and prosecutors just won't, in the future, pursue criminal investigations and criminal cases if the suspected criminals in those cases are associated with the president and this movement that supports him. They are trying to not get rid of an investigation, they're trying to get rid of American law enforcement as we know it. They are trying to get rid of the very idea of an independent, justice-is-blind system that makes America who we are. This is not the Saturday Night Massacre. This is considerably worse, and it is hard to see how what happens tonight can be corrected, can be undone, the way the Saturday Night Massacre was undone within 12 days. This is a really serious thing. Now, before tonight, they had already fired prosecutors who had worked on the special counsel's investigation that brought charges against President Trump. The charges for the alleged hoarding and mishandling of classified documents, charges for illegally trying to overthrow the results of the 2020 presidential election. They already fired prosecutors involved with those investigations. What they are doing tonight is apparently attempting a mass purge of prosecutors who worked on all the other January 6th cases, the ones just involving rioters who attacked the Capitol building on Trump's behalf. Tonight, approximately 30 prosecutors who worked on January 6th rioter prosecutions have all been fired. We are going to be speaking with one of those prosecutors in just a moment. Beyond that, they appear to be in the midst of a mass purge at the FBI. At least a half dozen senior leaders of the FBI have already been told to resign or be fired on Monday. Beyond that senior leadership, though, they are also trying to remove just normal FBI line agents, potentially hundreds or even thousands of them. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, this is still an emerging story. Details may yet evolve as this story develops and we learn more. My best understanding of what has happened thus far is this. And if I stand corrected by the end of this hour, I will not be surprised. But this is what I understand what I understand to have happened just thus far. In an instruction that appears to have originated at the White House, Trump's hand-picked acting officials at the Justice Department directed FBI headquarters to hand over internal files from the Jack Smith cases, from the Trump classified documents case, from the Trump overthrow the election case. They were told, the FBI headquarters was told to hand over those files so a list could be made of all FBI line agents and FBI supervisors who were involved in those cases in any way. So personnel action could be taken against those FBI personnel.
I'm just going to the bathroom.
So they could be punished, removed, reassigned, or fired. The Washington Post reports tonight that FBI supervisors advised agents that any agents who worked on either of those two cases, the Jack Smith cases, FBI supervisors reportedly advised agents that they should be prepared for the Trump administration to release to the public the names of the FBI agents who worked on those cases before they would then be fired on Monday. So rather than just firing them, they were basically going to tell, Trump supporters, including those who were just let out of prison by Donald Trump, tell them, hey, here's the names of FBI agents who were part of all the January 6th investigations, the ones that targeted Trump. Don't worry, though, they're no longer agents. We're firing them today, so go ahead and have at them. Now, tonight, MSNBC's Ryan Riley has obtained a memo sent by the acting director of the FBI to all FBI personnel, and it would seem to indicate that even beyond those things that I have just described, beyond the prosecutors who did the two Trump cases, beyond FBI personnel at the senior levels of the FBI, beyond FBI personnel involved in the two Trump cases, what Ryan Riley has obtained tonight, this letter from the acting FBI director to all FBI personnel, would seem to indicate that they are planning a massive purge beyond that. Some kind of purge against not just the agents who participated in some way in the two Jack Smith cases, where Trump was charged, but beyond that, they appear to be targeting all the FBI agents who were involved in any of the cases brought against January 6th rioters. And to put this in perspective, the January 6th riot cases make up the largest single investigation ever in the history of the Bureau. The January 6th cases are the largest criminal caseload ever assembled by the Department of Justice. If they are going to try to purge every FBI agent who took any part in any one of these well over 1,000 cases, that's kind of the whole FBI. I mean, not every single member of the FBI, but certainly most of the FBI. Here's the memo obtained tonight by MSNBC's Ryan Riley. Quote, colleagues, we understand there's a lot of media reporting and rumors surrounding potential changes at the FBI. This includes reporting and rumors about actions that very seriously impact our workforce. Consistent with our commitment to share information with you as we receive it, Acting Deputy Director Kassane and I want to provide you with an update. Late this afternoon, I received a memo from the Acting Deputy Attorney General notifying me that 8 senior FBI executives are to be terminated by specific dates unless these employees have retired beforehand. So 8 of them will be out unless they quit. Quote, I have been personally in touch with each of these impacted employees. The memo also directs me to provide by noon on Tuesday the following, quote, all current and former FBI personnel assigned at any time to investigations and or prosecutions relating to events that occurred at or near the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. And also, secondly, United States versus Haniyeh, which is, I believe, a case about Hamas and the October 7th attack. They want a list of all current and former FBI personnel assigned at any time to investigations or prosecutions related to January 6th or that one Hamas case. Quote, these lists should include relevant supervisory personnel in FBI regional offices and field divisions, as well as FBI headquarters. For each employee included in the list, provide the current title, office to which the person is assigned, role in the investigation or prosecution, and date of last activity relating to the investigation or prosecution. Upon timely receipt of the requested information, the Office of the Deputy Attorney General will commence a review process to determine whether additional personnel actions are necessary. The acting director of the FBI then tells personnel at the FBI, quote, "We understand that this request encompasses thousands of FBI employees across the country who have supported these investigative efforts. I am one of those employees, as is Acting Deputy Director Kassane. As we have said since the moment we agreed to take on these roles, meaning the acting director and acting deputy director of the FBI, we are going to follow the law, follow FBI policy, and do what is in the best interest of the workforce and the American people always. We will be back in touch with more information as soon as we can. In the meantime, stay safe and take care of each other. Brian J. Driscoll Jr., Acting Director." Again, this letter tonight to all FBI personnel is from Brian Driscoll, who is the somewhat accidental acting director of the FBI. He's a longtime employee of the FBI, he's apparently part of the hostage rescue team. The Trump administration tried to name him to be the number 2. They tried to name him to be the acting deputy director of the FBI. There was a whole different guy, Robert Kassane, New York counterterrorism official, who was supposed to be named acting director, but the Wall Street Journal reported yesterday that the Trump administration actually mixed up which guy was which. They meant to name Kassane to be director and Driscoll to be deputy, but they screwed up and accidentally named Driscoll the director and Kassane the deputy. Once those two guys realized that they'd been named for the wrong jobs, they just decided it would be easier to switch jobs and switch offices, so that's how we got Brian Driscoll as the acting director of the FBI tonight. As former Trump defense lawyer Emil Bove at the Justice Department, possibly on orders from the White House, has demanded a list of every single FBI agent in the entire country who worked on any January 6th case in any capacity at all. And even though that includes the new acting director and the new acting deputy director, who Trump himself just ham-handedly accidentally appointed, they say the reason they want that list is because they're going to review it for potential personnel action against all those agents. Again, that is thousands of FBI agents all across the country. And again, this is a developing story. This is as clear as I can be with you right now on the details of what has happened and what they seem to be trying to do. But also be clear on what this means, right? This is not an if situation. We are seeing it already with the firings they have already effectuated, with the threats they have already made. If law enforcement officials and agents have their careers threatened, which they have now all had their careers threatened, and indeed if they are fired, and they indeed are already starting to be fired, if they have their careers threatened and are fired because they took part in lawfully predicated criminal investigations, where grand juries handed down indictments, where judges signed search warrants, where juries returned convictions, if they nevertheless are fired for taking part in those lawful, proper criminal law enforcement actions because the president in power now doesn't like those cases, that is not Nixon. That is not a president trying to get out of an investigation he's scared of for himself. That is the end of independent law enforcement as a core value of who we are as a country, right? That's an end to the idea that law enforcement pursues justice without regard to favors and preferences dictated by the people in power. Here's how the New York Times puts it tonight, quote, "If the administration follows through, it would be a singular moment in the FBI's history, and it would fly in the face of decades worth of civil service laws that are meant to protect the integrity and professionalism of federal law enforcement." And those are very pretty words and nice concepts, and that means they all blur together and seem just kind of like Americana. Let's be more blunt about it. If you lose those things, if you lose the independence and professionalism of federal law enforcement, what that means is we are rewiring the FBI and federal prosecutors so they will now, henceforth, only do arrests and searches and investigations and prosecutions that please the president, regardless of who it is that's committing crimes. These firings, which are now underway, are changing one of the fundamental things that makes us the kind of country that we are. This is very bad. Jamie Raskin, Democratic congressman and professor of constitutional law, told the Washington Post tonight this. He said, quote, "If allowed to proceed, Trump's purge of our federal law enforcement workforce will expose America to authoritarianism and dictatorship." Joining us now is Carol Lennig, Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post investigative reporter who is really, really well-sourced on justice matters and law enforcement. She's covering this story tonight. Carol, thanks for being here tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're in the midst of a lot of reporting.
Glad to be here, Rachel.
Let me ask you if I've said anything that strikes you as wrong or that's been overtaken by subsequent reporting since I started talking.
No, unfortunately, I think everything you've relayed is very factual. What we're seeing is a series of people who are being told they'll be terminated likely by Monday if they don't move along quickly. They are very much the senior cadre of leadership of the FBI, all of them career, not one political. And we are also seeing that thousands of agents are essentially on tenterhooks now after a series of memos, both a memo from the acting attorney general and an email from the acting FBI director telling them that files are being reviewed now, mostly at the White House's behest, to determine which agents who worked, which scores of agents worked on the January 6th investigation, a riot in which police officers died and were injured, 140 were injured, that those individuals may be reviewed for termination as well, and that lists are being made for future punitive terminations or disciplinary decisions. And I couldn't underscore more how frightened the individuals I've spoken to have been, both those who are in the crosshairs of a potential termination, and also those who are their colleagues and worked with them at the Department of Justice or worked with them on important cases and are kind of gobsmacked at the idea that agents who basically did their job to try to investigate and bring evidence of violent crimes are now going to be fired for that because it is politically unpleasant for Donald Trump to be reminded that January 6th was a violent attack and an effort to overturn a free and fair election.
Carol, one level at which this is going to have an impact is obviously on the lives of these individual agents and on their families. And for people who were involved in January 6 investigations, either of the Capitol rioters or the one that overturned the election case involving Donald Trump, them being named and drummed out of the agency also potentially has real security implications for them in terms of being targeted by the people who Donald Trump has just sprung from prison. That's part of, I imagine, the fear that you're talking about here. But the other level of impact here is how this changes the country. This is being described widely as a sharp departure from anything else that has ever happened in U.S. federal law enforcement. My view of it is I don't know anything else to compare this to. Can you describe what is so different about this and what the potential impact of this is on federal law enforcement beyond just the personal impact on these agents?
To draw a comparison between the weeks before, Rachel, agents were being asked to conduct a surprise raid, a surprise unannounced search at Donald Trump's part-time residence at Mar-a-Lago. The evidence was coming in all summer that was overwhelming, that Donald Trump had been withholding, hoarding, and mishandling some of the government's most precious secrets, things that keep our country safe, the thing that keeps Americans safe. The government had unbelievable evidence that summer that this crime was happening. FBI agents were a little bit nervous, especially supervisors, about searching the former president's home. It was very nerve-wracking to them because they had seen some of their friends get into a lot of trouble for investigating Russian operatives trying to make contact and sort of butter up and connect with the Donald Trump campaign in 2016. They saw investigations, they saw congressional questioning, they saw doxing, claims that specific agents were unethical, things that were spread in the press and leaked to the press largely by Republican allies of Donald Trump's. And they were worried about conducting this investigation when all of the evidence pointed to a very serious crime of obstruction and mishandling of records. Now you have so many scores more of agents on tenterhooks worried about their future. And the message that sends to the entire Bureau, and also beyond it to the Department of Justice, lawyers and prosecutors, is certain investigations are not okay. And you better look twice or maybe 3 times before you decide that you should accept your mission, which is to investigate and fight crime. That is a very worrisome thing. Is it okay to investigate Bob Menendez for taking a bribe from Egyptians? Is it okay to investigate and prosecute him? But it's not okay to investigate other people who are allied with Donald Trump or who are serving Donald Trump or who are Donald Trump himself.
Yeah. Carol Lenig, invaluable perspective on this, and your deep reporting and analysis here is really, really helpful for us to understand it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
All right, we have much more on this breaking story to come tonight. We're going to take one quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk live with one of the Justice Department prosecutors who was just fired tonight. Not for cause, but because the January 6th prosecutors are all getting fired. There's a lot going on tonight. You're going to want to see this interview when we come back. Stay with us.